The night had swallowed the mountains whole. The storm moved like a living thing, its voice a deep, rolling growl that echoed through the valley. Rain came sideways, driven by a wind sharp enough to flay the skin, and every tree bent under its rage. Inside the cabin, Jacob Turner sat near the stove, the fire's orange glow painting his lined face in restless flickers. He'd long since given up expecting visitors. He hadn't seen another soul in weeks. The storm had trapped him up here, same as it trapped the world outside beneath its claws. When the knock came, it wasn't loud at first. A soft, uncertain tapping. He thought he imagined it, a loose shutter or a branch thrown against the door. But then it came again, this time firmer, desperate. Jacob rose, chair scraping against the wooden floor. For a moment, he only stood there, listening. The sound of the wind almost swallowed the next knock, but it was real. Someone was out there. He grabbed the lantern, lifting it high. The flame inside shivered with the draft. As he crossed the room, his boots thudded heavy on the planks. When he opened the door, the wind clawed its way inside, scattering ash from the hearth and slapping cold rain across his face. She stood on the porch, or what was left of her strength did. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, drenched through, her clothes little more than torn rags clinging to her skin. Mud streaked her legs, her arms trembling from the cold. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then her lips parted, her voice hoarse and broken. "Please, help me." Jacob's instinct told him to hesitate. The mountains didn't bring strangers in weather like this unless trouble followed them. But another look at her, the cuts along her arms, the sheer exhaustion in her eyes, stripped away any thought of turning her away. He stepped aside. "Get in." She stumbled past him, her knees nearly buckling once she crossed the threshold. He shut the door hard against the wind and turned back to her. She stood by the stove, shivering, water pooling around her feet. "Sit," he said, grabbing a blanket from the back of the couch. She didn't argue, just sank into the nearest chair. He wrapped the wool around her shoulders. It swallowed her, and still she shivered. Her fingers were raw, the nails broken and black with dirt. "Thank you," she murmured. Jacob crouched by the stove, feeding in another log. The flames flared, spitting sparks. "You're half frozen," he said. "Where the hell did you come from?" For a moment she didn't answer. She just stared into the fire, eyes unfocused. Then she whispered, "The road washed out. My car," she swallowed hard. "It went off the bridge. I walked for hours. I thought I saw lights." He studied her. The nearest bridge was 5 miles down the valley, past the creek that had likely become a river by now. If she'd walked that distance in this weather, it was a miracle she was still breathing. "Anyone else with you?" She shook her head. A drop of water fell from her hair onto her knee. "No, just me." Jacob nodded, his jaw tightening. He'd learned not to ask too many questions too soon. People broke differently when they'd been through something, sometimes silence was safer. He got up, filled a kettle with water, and set it on the stove. "Name's Jacob," he said over his shoulder. She hesitated, then said, "Clara." Her voice was small, fragile. He turned back toward her, saw the way she hugged the blanket closer, as if trying to disappear inside it. She had that look, a hunted look. Not just from the storm. From something deeper. When the water boiled, he poured her a cup of tea, the kind he made from dried pine needles and mint he grew by the window. She took it with both hands, steam rising against her face. "You've got a cut on your leg," he said quietly. Clara looked down, as if she hadn't noticed. A gash ran along her calf, caked with mud. "I'll be fine," she said quickly, too quickly. Jacob frowned. "You won't if it gets infected. I've got a kit somewhere." He went to a cupboard, pulling down an old tin box. The storm rattled the windows as he knelt beside her. She flinched when he reached for her leg. "Easy," he said softly. "You're safe here." She let out a shaky breath and nodded. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could, the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air. Her eyes followed his hands, tense but grateful. When he finished, he wrapped the cut and leaned back. "That should hold." "Thank you," she whispered again. He poured himself a cup of tea and sat across from her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind outside howled like something alive. Inside, the fire crackled, and the cabin felt almost like an island floating in the dark. Finally, Jacob said, "You from around here?" She hesitated. "No. I was just passing through." He waited, but she offered nothing more. Her eyes darted toward the window every time the wind rose. Jacob followed her gaze. There was nothing to see beyond the storm, but he had the sense she was listening for something, or someone. You think somebody might come looking for you? That time, her eyes snapped to his. I hope not, she said, her voice trembling. Then, softer, I just needed to get away. The words hung in the air. Jacob didn't push further. Whatever she was running from, it wasn't his place to pry, not yet. He'd been in that position once himself. When the storm eased an hour later, he stood and checked the door latch. There's a spare room down the hall. Sheets are clean enough. You should rest. Clara looked uncertain. I don't want to be any trouble. You're already here, he said. Might as well stay warm. She gave a faint, tired smile, the first real sign of life he'd seen in her face. She rose, legs unsteady, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Good night, Jacob. He nodded. Good night, Clara. After she disappeared into the small back room, Jacob stayed by the fire a long while. The storm had begun to fade, but unease lingered in the walls. He couldn't shake the feeling that her arrival wasn't coincidence. The valley didn't get many visitors, not this deep in winter. And yet, something about her eyes, the way they'd flicked toward the door every few minutes, told him danger hadn't been left behind. It was out there, waiting. When he finally went to bed, he kept the lantern burning. Hours later, sometime past midnight, a sound woke him, faint, distant but unmistakable. The crunch of boots on wet gravel. His breath caught. No one should be out there. He rose quietly, slipped on his coat, and moved to the window. The glass was fogged, but he could just make out shapes in the dark, two figures, flashlights slicing through the rain. They were moving slowly, searching. Jacob's pulse quickened. He turned toward the hallway, toward the closed door where Clara slept. A sliver of light showed beneath it. She was awake. He knocked softly. Clara, he whispered. The door opened a crack, her face pale in the dim light. You heard them too, she said. It wasn't a question. Who are they? He asked. She swallowed hard. Please, don't let them in. Outside, the flashlights swept closer, beams cutting through the sheets of rain. Jacob's hand tightened around the doorknob. He had no idea what he was being pulled into, but something in her eyes, raw fear, the kind that couldn't be faked, made the choice for him. He turned off the lantern. The cabin fell into darkness. For the next few minutes, they stood frozen, listening as the footsteps circled the cabin. One of the men called out, his voice muffled by the storm. Anyone in there? We're looking for someone. Young woman, dark hair, about 5'6". Jacob said nothing. The other voice was deeper, rougher. She can't have gone far. Check the shed. They moved away, the sound of their boots fading toward the trees. Clara let out a breath that trembled like a leaf. Jacob turned to her. You want to tell me what's going on? She shook her head, eyes glistening. If I do, you'll make me leave. I just hid you from two strangers in the middle of a storm, he said quietly. You think I'd throw you out now? Something inside her broke then. Tears welled, but she brushed them away quickly, shaking her head. I didn't do anything wrong, she whispered. I saw something I shouldn't have. Jacob waited. They killed him, she said finally, voice cracking. At the gas station off Route 14. I was just stopping for coffee. They didn't know anyone was there. But I saw their faces. She swallowed. They saw me too. Jacob felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. You came up here to hide, he said. I didn't know where else to go, she admitted. The bridge, I thought if I could get across, I'd make it to the highway. But the car went under. I just kept walking. He looked toward the window. The men's lights were gone now, but their presence lingered like smoke. All right, he said finally. You'll stay here until morning. When the storm lets up, we'll figure something out. You don't have to. I'm not sending you back out there, he interrupted. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes softening. Why are you helping me? Jacob stared into the dying fire. Because once, he said slowly, somebody did the same for me. The silence that followed was heavy but not cold. Clara nodded and stepped back into her room. Jacob stayed by the window until dawn's pale light began to seep through the cracks in the shutters. The storm had passed, leaving the forest soaked and silent. When he finally turned away, he knew things had changed. Whatever quiet life he'd built up here was over. The knock on his door hadn't just brought a stranger, It had brought the past roaring back, and with it, a danger he thought he'd buried years ago. He looked toward the room where Clara slept, her faint breathing steady in the hush. For now, at least, she was safe. But somewhere down in the valley, men with flashlights were still searching. And Jacob Turner knew that when they came back, and they would, the cabin in the mountains would no longer be just a refuge. It would be a line neither of them could cross without changing their lives forever.